Thank you all for welcoming me here once again. When I was preparing for this talk, actually I haven't prepared because I had no idea what you want to hear. I realized that I've been in the profession for longer than many of you have been alive, and which was somewhat a sobering thought. But I was when I was driving up here, I was suddenly struck with what was the first thing that hooked me to this profession. And I don't actually call it a profession because I truly love what I do. So why does Modi ji travel so much? And I have to tell you that before he was elected, we were told by all his supporters, his advisors, people who were really close to him, that, you know, you'll have it really easy. You don't have to chase this man around, and you don't have to, he's not interested in foreign policy at all. He's only interested in domestic economic policy. He's really not interested in foreign policy. Fine. So we were looking forward to several years of low activity. And then he jumped in and said, no, well, you know what? I'm going to invite everybody in the region to my swearing-in ceremony. Nobody had ever heard of it, least of all in the Foreign Office. Nobody had ever even imagined that this could happen. And this is actually the characteristic of a leader who changes the game. And in many ways, Modi has changed the game by this huge personal push. So from that moment when he invited everybody, including Nawaz Sharif, everybody into the swearing-in ceremony, he has basically been on a hoverboard around the world. Why has he done that? Well, you look at what he inherited, and look at the situation he was in, or rather India's in. He came in on a mandate to transform the country, to transform society, our economy, etc. After several years of an economic slump, policy paralysis, etc., Indians wanted a change. This is a new India. You know, most of India is as old as you are. And you have dreams, you have aspirations, you need jobs, you need employment opportunities, you need innovation opportunities, you need a bigger place, you need a bigger stage to play in. The Indian economy was not doing well. So where does he get the investment? So he's looking around, where's the investment? The investment has to be from overseas, because Indian companies are stressed, Indian banks are stressed. He needs investment from overseas. That was one of his big. The second is his whole transformational agenda goes like this. You can almost categorize them and sort of connect them to how he works his foreign policy. So it's Make in India, Startup India, Digital India, Smart Cities. How does it work? So foreign investment, you need for Make in India. For Make in India, what do you need? You need skills, you need skilled people. So Skill India. Where do people with skills go? Not to the villages, to the cities. Then you need your smart cities. What do you need in smart cities? As Mr. Ravindra said, you need clean water. So you need you need cleanliness. So you need your Swachh Bharat, you need your clean Ganga, you need your clean rivers. Who works there? How do you make your cities safe? Where do they work? Your women. Your girls, your women need to be out there to work, to study, etc. So the next level of his program, which is what? Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. So you can almost see it, and you can see that the one thing about Mr. Modi is he's quite clear that these are his projects, these big transformational projects that he has. That's what he wants the rest of the world to finance, to give technologies for, to give expertise for, to come here and do it. And that's what he wants to do. He's not unique, of course, because this is what leaders do. So that's one big part of why he travels. The second thing, the second reason why he would travel, and why other leaders travel. I mean, it's not Mr. Modi, and we really give him a hard time. But look at the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Shinzo Abe, in his first 12 months, I think, traveled in 64 countries. So did Xi Jinping. Then when Xi Jinping took over as the president of China, he traveled across Latin America, Asia, Africa, you name it. So one of the things that they do is actually the personal rapport or the personal relationships that they build sometimes work as force multipliers. But there are times when they don't work, of course, as force multipliers. But look at Modi and Obama. Now, this is a man who was denied a visa for 10 years by America. So he, not only did he land in America, he found that he could make a big friend of Obama, and somehow he and Obama clicked. Two very different people from very different backgrounds, very different political ideologies, but they clicked and they worked. Where do you find the work? So if you see 2015, we had the World Climate Change Conference in Paris. Why was it important? The climate change is very close to, we all believe climate change is very close to the heart of all Western countries. But climate change actually affects who the most? It affects us the most. And it affects the poorest Indian farmer the most. For the first time, India was not playing the bad boy in the room. So it was an India-America understanding that proved to be the basis for a huge global climate change agreement that we saw in Paris. These are things that don't happen because people think, oh, it is wonderful that India is doing this. It just happens, a lot of it happens because Obama and Modi look at each other and say, you know what, let's do something about it. And these are very important reasons to have people get across, to call them. Generally people call each other after dinner and say, okay, you know, they have conversations like you and me. And the thing is, their conversations actually turn the tide of countries. Ours are just fun. And few years ago, Manmohan Singh, the same America and the same India, again, two very different leaders. There was Manmohan Singh, very cerebral, very quiet, not the flamboyant personality that Mr. Modi is. Very quiet, very unassuming. And on the other side was George Bush, very, very different. Who people thought was, you know, a bumbling idiot, etc., etc. He did the smartest thing, because there was George Bush and there was Manmohan Singh doing something very, very obscure called a nuclear deal. Now, till date, I can throw a piece of paper at a room and eyes would glaze over on a nuclear deal. Why did we do it? What is it in it? What is in it for us? So, just in 1 minute, what is in it for us? It is not about building nuclear reactors. So you can throw that out of your head. It is because since 1974, when we conducted our first nuclear test, the world had created a structure of institutions, rules, regimes that denied India technologies across the sphere. So some aspects of space technologies we couldn't access. We couldn't even build a fishing rod, because high-class fishing rods are made with materials that are called dual use, which means they are used for a fishing rod, but they're also used in missile applications. And so they were denied. So you needed to break this global structure. For us to be able to, where are we? We are a knowledge power. We want to be a knowledge power. How is it that we can be a knowledge power when we cannot even access that knowledge or that technology? So one of the things that this deal, which was a very, very weird deal, did was change the way we thought about ourselves, but change the way the world thought about us. Because we actually broke the doors to let ourselves into groups, rooms, places where we were completely not allowed for 30 years before that. So, but that was again done by two very, very different people, and only because George Bush decided that Indians were it. Apparently, when his wife was expecting their twin daughters, they had gone to several radiologists in those days. Their radiologists also were not that great, and but then the radiologist who or the doctor who sort of found that they were expecting twins was an Indian, and since then he had sort of some idea in his head that these Indians are smart people, and somehow we need to bring smart people in. And so George Bush pretended he was very simple, but he wasn't actually. Have I overshot my time? Okay. And but anyway, so Indians were it as far as he was concerned. So I'll quickly go to the last question, that is, what is our strategy? Do we have a strategy? So in all this chaos, there is a strategy. One is, of course, what is our strategy in our foreign policy? One is to promote your economic interests. And there you look at things like WTO. For instance, today the fact that we're all using cell phones and it's sort of all over the place, ubiquitous. When the first Indian official went to negotiate on telecommunications, he was asked, you must make sure that MTNL remains the most important organization in this country. MTNL cannot be touched. So, but it was a clever Indian official. So he worked around the system in a way that spectrum became a commodity. And spectrum became something the governments made money of. And you and I have cell phones that we can buy within a minute, and don't have to wait any longer for 3 months and a contact in the government to get a telephone connection. National security, very important. That's actually a no-brainer. Like Henry Kissinger said, we live in a tough neighborhood. So we need, so national security is one of the big underlying themes of our foreign policy. Third, look at all of us. This is a country with a rising middle class. We want India to be something, to be counted for something. There is a question of respectability. There is a question of reputation. So what is it that India stands for? Today, what does it stand for? It stands for, brains, IT. We are the kind of people countries want in their countries. In America, Indians are the wealthiest and the most educated ethnic group. We have yoga, we have Bollywood, and we're a country that is not given to the kind of extreme ideologies that you see proliferating in the world. We are basically a bunch of people who like science and like arts and like our Bollywood and like song and dance. We have fabulous food, and we just want to make sure the world knows it. So that's an important aspiration. It's a reputational aspiration. It only happens to nations when they actually achieve a certain level of prosperity. So that's where we are. So when our diplomat gets strip searched in New York, it bothers us. it's a national outrage. And that will happen more and more as we become more confident in the world, as we become a bigger nation in the world. Then the next reason for, a very, very important reason for all of us, for Indian foreign policy, is where do we send all our people? We have 1.25 billion smart people, and they don't need to stay in India. We need them to go across the world. So how do they go? We need to break those barriers down and make those deals to enable Indians to get the visas, to be able to work, live in different parts of the world. So these are all parts of foreign policy that we don't see, but they affect you and me in our everyday lives. So this has been a journey that I have been on almost for the last couple of decades, and I love it as much today as I did when those nuclear weapons went off in Pokhran in '98. So thank you all for listening to me.